I'm Alex, a freelance graphic designer who's lived in a third-floor walk-up for the past 3 years. The place is tiny, the rent's decent, and the only thing that ever bothered me was that my landlord, Mr. Patel, seemed to think the building was a community theater rather than a set of rental units. It started small. One summer, the dishwasher stopped working and I called Mr. Patel. He showed up the next day with a wrench, a toolbox, and a bright orange Hawaiian shirt. He spent an hour under the sink, humming Kokomo, and when he finally got the thing to run, he declared, "All fixed. And you owe me $15 for the tropical vibe surcharge." I laughed it off, paid the extra, and moved on. Fast forward to October. The hallway ceiling started leaking after a storm. Water dripped onto the hallway carpet, forming a slow-moving river that threatened to flood my bedroom door. I texted Mr. Patel, expecting a quick fix. He replied with a gif of a cat in a raincoat and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it tomorrow." The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my door. I opened it to find Mr. Patel standing in the hallway, wearing a full-body mascot costume that looked like a giant, smiling banana. He held a clipboard and a megaphone. "Good morning, contestant," he announced, his voice echoing through the hallway. "Welcome to Fix It or Flip It, the only reality show where tenants get to win a free month's rent by completing maintenance challenges." I stared at him, mouth open, as he thrust the megaphone into my face. "Your first challenge," he boomed, "is to locate the source of the leak using only a flashlight and a rubber duck. You have 10 minutes. Ready? Go!" I could have screamed, or I could have called the police. I chose the latter because my rent was due in 2 days and I needed to keep a roof over my head. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand, snatched a rubber duck from my bathroom, a souvenir from a trip to Kyoto, and headed into the hallway. The banana-suit landlord clapped his hands and shouted, "Let the games begin." The hallway was dim, the leak a steady trickle that sounded like a distant faucet. I followed the sound, the rubber duck squeaking every few seconds as I pressed it against the wall. After a few minutes, I found a busted pipe behind the fire escape door. I called Mr. Patel, who burst out of the closet in a glittery cape, shouting, "Time's up. You win 5% off your rent." I laughed, but the laughter was nervous. The prize was a handwritten note that said, 5% off next month's rent for completing the leak hunt. It was the kind of note you'd write on a napkin at a diner. I thanked him, took the note, and tried to go back to work, but the day was far from over. Later that afternoon, Mr. Patel sent a group text to all tenants, "Reminder. Tonight at 7 p.m., we'll have the Appliance Olympics. Bring your competitive spirit and a willingness to get dirty." The text included a meme of a hamster on a treadmill labeled "Rent Increase Coming Soon." I was about to ignore it when the building's electricity flickered, and the lights went out. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and made my way down the stairs to the lobby. The power outage had turned the hallway into a cavern of shadows. Suddenly, a bright spotlight illuminated the lobby's communal kitchen, where Mr. Patel stood on a makeshift podium, wearing a referee shirt and a whistle around his neck. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first ever Appliance Olympics," he announced, his voice amplified by a portable speaker. "Tonight's event, the washer-dryer relay. Contestants will race to load, start, and unload the machines in the fastest time. The winner gets a $100 gift card to the local hardware store. The loser, well, let's just say we'll discuss the terms of their lease renewal later." A murmur spread through the building. Tenants I'd only ever nodded at in the elevator were now eyeing each other like gladiators. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't own a washer, my laundry was done at the laundromat downstairs, but the lease contract said I was responsible for participating in building-wide community events as deemed appropriate by management. I'd signed that clause without reading the fine print because, honestly, who reads a lease when they're just trying to move in? The whistle blew. A tall man from Unit 4B sprinted to the washer, shoved a load of his roommate's socks in, and hit the start button. He then jogged over to the dryer, pulled out a damp blanket, and tossed it onto the floor. The crowd cheered. I was next. I hesitated, then forced my feet to move. I opened the washer door, shoved in a handful of my own clothes, just a couple of t-shirts and a pair of jeans, closed the lid, and started the cycle. I could feel every eye in the building on me, a mix of pity and amusement. The dryer was next. I shoved the wet clothes in, hit the button, and waited. The timer ticked down slower than I'd expected. When the dryer finally beeped, I opened the door to reveal a pile of steaming, half-dry garments. I tried to wring them out, but the machine sputtered and coughed, spewing a puff of hot steam that made the room feel like a sauna. Mr. Patel's megaphone crackled, and the winner is Unit 3C. You've earned the $100 gift card. The applause was louder than I'd ever heard in that building. He turned to me, the banana suit now replaced with a crisp black suit, and said, "Alex, thank you for being a good sport. As promised, here's your gift card." He handed me a plastic card with my name embossed in glossy gold letters. I slipped it into my pocket, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and relief. The rest of the night went on with toaster toss and fridge hide and seek. By midnight, the lights flickered back on, the crowd dispersed, and Mr. Patel vanished into his office, leaving a stack of flyers on the bulletin board that read, "Next month's event, rent negotiation duel." The next morning, I woke up to a new email from Mr. Patel titled, "Your lease renewal." It attached a PDF titled "Renewal Agreement, Updated Terms." I skimmed it while sipping coffee, and my heart rate spiked. The document included a clause that said, tenants who fail to achieve a minimum score of 75% in any building event may be subject to a rent increase of up to 15% upon renewal. I stared at the paragraph for a full minute, feeling the weight of the absurdity settle in. I remembered the $100 gift card, the banana suit, the rubber duck. Nothing made sense. I opened a new email, typed, "Can we discuss these new terms?" They weren't part of the original lease. Within 5 minutes, Mr. Patel replied, "Of course, Alex. Let's meet at 3 p.m. in the lobby. Bring your best game face." I spent the next 2 hours Googling landlord game show clauses and tenant rights absurd lease terms. I called a friend who works as a property manager, and she laughed, "That's a classic malicious compliance move. He's trying to force you out without actually evicting you." At 3 p.m., I walked into the lobby to find a small stage set up with a podium, a microphone, and a banner that read, "Renters Redemption, the Final Round." Mr. Patel stood behind the podium, now wearing a judge's robe and a gavel. He gestured to a table where a stack of papers sat. "Welcome, Alex," he said, his voice unusually calm. "You've done well in the previous rounds. Now it's time for the ultimate test, the rent negotiation duel. You'll have 3 minutes to present your case, after which I'll decide whether you get the standard renewal or the new terms." My palms were slick. I took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and launched into my prepared spiel. I talked about my steady income, my timely payments, the fact that the building's community events felt more like a psychological experiment, and the unreasonable clause that seemed designed to push tenants out. I cited the local housing code, which required that any rent increase be justified with proper notice and not be tied to arbitrary performance metrics. When I finished, I could see the corners of Mr. Patel's mouth twitch. He tapped his gavel, looked at the stack of papers, and said, "Very persuasive, Alex. I'll consider your points." He flipped through the contract, paused, and then placed a single sheet on the podium. It read, "Renewal approved with original terms. No rent increase. No further community events required." I exhaled, feeling a mix of triumph and disbelief. The other tenants who had gathered to watch clapped politely, some looking relieved, others still wary. Mr. Patel smiled, his eyes flashing a strange mix of amusement and respect. "Well played, Alex. Looks like you've earned a free pass." As I walked out of the lobby, I heard a faint squeak behind me. I turned to see the rubber duck I'd used in the leak hunt sitting on the stage, its beady eyes staring back at me. I picked it up, chuckled, and slipped it into my bag. That night, I posted a quick message on a tenant rights subreddit, describing the whole ordeal. Within hours, I got a flood of messages from people who'd experienced similar community events turned into intimidation tactics. Some offered legal advice, others just sent emojis. I felt a strange sense of camaraderie, as if I'd joined a secret club of people who'd survived their landlord's twisted game shows. The next time Mr. Patel tried to schedule another event, this time a yoga and yard sale fusion, I simply replied, "I'll be out of town that day, sorry." He sent a polite note of "No worries, see you next time," and the calendar stayed empty. A few weeks later, a new tenant moved into Unit 2A. I handed them a small envelope with a single piece of paper. If you ever see a banana suit landlord with a microphone, run. Or at least bring a rubber duck. They laughed, thanked me, and slipped the note into their pocket. Looking back, I realized that the whole circus was less about the actual repairs and more about control. Mr. Patel wanted to see how far he could push us before we either broke or fought back. By treating the building like a stage, he gave us the script, but we got to improvise. Now, every time the hallway lights flicker, I smile, remembering the day the lease turned into a live-action game show. I keep the rubber duck on my desk as a reminder that sometimes, the smallest tools can be the most effective weapons against absurdity. And if you ever get a text about an appliance Olympics, just remember, you're probably not the only one playing the game, and you've already got the best cheat code, knowing when to say no. So, that's my story. No moral, just a reminder that landlords can get weird, tenants can get clever, and the hallway can become a stage for a drama you never signed up for.